be, it's really great for the first 4 minutes. You have the actual concept of how long does it have to be. You just can't stretch it out. So if it's only 33 minutes of content, true story, it should only be 33.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that, you know, we have to cut something for time. We haven't heard that phrase in a year and a half I've been there. We don't cut anything for time. You let it play the way it's intended to play and what's most meaningful for the audience and the creators.
I mean, we work mostly in factual. You also have more, I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't have to have more than one broadcaster to pay for their TV shows anymore. And trying to get two people on the same page with two different versions, it just becomes a nightmare. Whereas if you can do it, just how long should the story be? It's a freedom that, as a TV producer, is welcome. You can't do it as often as you'd like, but we're starting to find an option for that.
Yeah, I think the format's important too, just that, like, from the storyteller's perspective. Like, I feel like Netflix does this, but at the end of every episode, like, there's a cliffhanger, you know what I mean? It wants, they do it such that that's kind of just a natural place where you want to just keep watching. So, you know, in the middle of the episode, maybe you turn it off, but by the end of the episode, there's always something where, like, oh, I gotta watch the next thing. So even though there's no time restraint, I think that the format of the story and making sure that people stay on the platform and keep watching is probably an important for them.
Marianne, are you playing with formats as well at NRK, or how do you,
Yeah, so Scum, when we edited these clips into episode, it could vary between 15 and 50 minutes because, as you say, we were able to dwell in the moment. But I think that it depends on which kind of format and which kind of concept that you are making. It's not for everything. But to be able to have that freedom now, where content is king,
Yes.
it's great.
To be, right?
It's great.
So in the crowd here, I know we have some broadcasters, we have a lot of producers, we may have some streaming platforms, obviously Joel here on the stage. I'm curious, as a producer, are your relationships different with your streaming partners than your broadcast partners? Is it the same kind of conversations? Is it different conversations? How do you categorize those relationships? Just call it out here for us all.
And be open, because it's fun.
Personally, I think it's theoretically different, but it's actually the same. You still, I mean, you've got network execs who, it doesn't matter what network they're at, they're still doing sort of that traditional provide notes. So that whole process seems to be the same. I find the streaming, when we haven't done a lot of long format, to be honest, but certainly these VR pieces we did with Hulu, I mean, there were notes on 2.5 minutes that are the same level of notes we'd get on a 6-part hour, because they're trying to figure it out at the same time we are. What could possibly go wrong? And that's that feeling of, if we're going to put our money there, we need to really be across it. So I think it's going to take some time, and it's more than anything trying to figure out who's the lead. If the OTT's the lead, then they'll do the notes. But it's just the same basic system for us anyway, so far.
And that production development from start to finish, again, same basic flow, or there's differences when you have like a Netflix or someone involved early on? Is it a different kind of conversation?
I think that, again, I think that conversations are the same. It's more, I mean, when you're going to a streaming like a YouTube, you're basically selling to what we would consider a cable network. Hi, every single show I have in development could potentially be something you might want to do, as opposed to traditional networks where you're going in and you're like, I know this is the History Channel, so I can actually talk about those kinds of things. But the process seems to be relatively similar. I think that ultimately streamers, it seems like a silly word to say, but just have the ability to take bigger swings and bigger risk, because they're not stuck in those sort of ad-based, typical traditional corporations ultimately.
Does that match, Matt, again, you've produced both for linear, for streaming players, you guys have traversed both. Does that match your experience? Fairly similar process, fairly similar set of notes, the relationships are similar, or how would you categorize it?
Yeah, I think in different, you know, streamers or companies have different mandates and different, you know, they're either really heavily stocked with development execs and they're really note heavy, or they're sort of more laissez-faire and they say, you know what, you guys have really strong creative voices. We want to just, you know, keep you aware of a couple minefields, but aside from that, you know, do your thing. And that's mostly the experience we've had, you know, working with all the people we've worked with, is everyone's kind of been pretty hands-off and let us kind of do what we want, or let the creators do what they want, and it's worked out really well. At the same time, sometimes network notes are really useful at the same, you know, And we're in development right now with the network, and we're getting notes, and they're great, and they're very helpful, and they know their audience the best. They know their audience. So, you know, that's if it is more of a commission job where we're making the show for them, then yeah, tell us what you think's going to work.
Absolutely.
You know.
Have you noticed the change on the broadcast side? A lot of you have long-standing relationships with broadcasters. You come from some broadcast background as well. Is there a difference in the kind of things broadcasters are asking you for in terms of deliverables, in terms of, like, as they produce long form with you, is their asks changing or developing in terms of the kind of stuff they're looking for?
I mean, they've been asking for sort of digital content. I think the digital content they're asking for, they're getting more specific about it. They're starting to understand and tell us what their audience is paying attention to on, you know, whether it's their streaming or their website. So now, we just got a development contract the other day, and it has, part of the deliverables are 3 standalone, unrelated digital series. I don't quite know why they're unrelated to the show that we're in development
3 extra
on.
license fees.
But they're 3, yeah, sure. I wouldn't hold my breath. But it's nice because we're all talking about PR in development, because ultimately that, for them, those digital plays have a way of pushing our linear forward. So I actually think it's a huge benefit, and I think the networks are starting to be part of the conversation, which is exciting.
I know they come into you saying, hey, we want not just digital content, but we want something for Facebook, something for Snapchat. Think about native content for those environments. Like, is that part of the consideration, is where's the content going to go at the end of the day as you develop it? Or are we not there yet?
It hasn't been a big part of our conversation, but I think we're talking about it for sure. I think we're all working together, depending on the content that we're producing ultimately, is what makes more sense. Do we do something for their app that could play on? And in the VR space, we have that conversation a lot. You know, is this going to play on Oculus and PlayStation 4, but do we do a 360 version that you can push out on Facebook or YouTube? I think those are the conversations, trying to figure out the smartest way to get to the audience in a way that the audience can relate to.
Marianne, sorry, go ahead.
Since I'm representing the broadcaster here, I must say that, I mean, for us, it is important to stay relevant for our audience. So what we are actually doing is making content that is exclusively for YouTube regarding the kids. Yeah, and that is a way, but it's, I mean, yeah, you can say that sounds strange, but that is a way to making ourselves be still relevant for the whole audience. We have to do that. So that is exciting, I must say.
It was interesting. We launched a show recently, Ultimate Expedition, with Rabbit Films, and there was a cast of approximately 10 individuals who, this gentleman, Jukka Hilden, out of Finland, who took him to a Peruvian mountain, and it was, you know, overcoming your own, obstacles, and it was a sort of a, competition show in that regard, although nobody was like eliminated. The participants actually created about 170 separate, discrete pieces of content, self-shot, self-distributed across multiple platforms. And one of the clips was like Steve-O, who rescued a street dog. And so that, that clip went out, and I think it's traveled to 30 million plus, views or something like that. So even on our side, being a social platform, like, we still, have engagement that we consider, off-platform, on-platform, outside of the core episodes.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know if you want to jump in, but I have sort of a follow-up question, which is more just thinking about social media and managing social media platforms related to your brands and your content. What's that relationship today between your broadcaster or streaming partner and you as the content creator? Is there, do you co-manage those things? Do they tend to take the lead on managing those social platforms on the platform side? Is it somewhere in the middle? How's it done today?
For us, I mean, basically, we try to just keep it in the creator's voice, so it's just consistent in terms of managing the brand of the show. So, we want as much as possible the creators to do it. Now, Facebook and Instagram and all this stuff, they have more tools, so more people can be joining the conversation of your collective show, right? So you can have like 4 people or 5 people managing it, whereas before it was a little bit harder. So, we just try to keep it in their voice, and then recently we've just sort of developed some strategies that are around getting the show out there, or like tapping into other stuff that people are doing. So like, Women Crush Wednesdays hashtag or something. Can we, highlight a female performer in our show and sort of tie into sort of popular culture? Because ultimately it's just really hard to break in, cut through the noise anyways. So we just want to kind of tap into that. And in terms of working with the broadcaster, I mean, they're very supportive of it, but they also have their own initiatives. They might want to, their biggest goal is to get subscribers to their network, whereas our biggest goal is to have people watch our show. So they're sort of in line, like we kind of fit into their model, but it's not necessarily. So, we tag them and do the rest. I don't know. I'm actually not a social media expert, but that's just kind of what we've been doing. I don't know if you guys have had some other experiences, like Kate, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar, again, I'm by no means a social media expert. I barely understand that Snapchat, I still don't understand it, but I have 3 friends on Snapchat that they're all under 17, so it's perfect. But it's trying to figure out what can we do to push our show forward, but at the same time complement the relationship with the broadcasters, And I think it's just got to be an open dialogue. One of the things that, when we sit in our office and say, well, I wish they were doing that, I find every time that we pick up the phone and talk to the network and say, okay, how can we work together to get eyeballs to our television show, and as a result, your station, I think everybody's open to it. We're just trying to figure it out. It's a sort of the world of teenagers, and we're all producers who are not teenagers and haven't been for a very long time. So it's how is the best way to get to integrate these kinds of relationships? And I have no idea what that answer is.
I think it has to be collaborative. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, the creators, and I use that term broadly because, the way I look at it is there's YouTube creators, but then anyone who, has an idea is a creator, so writers, producers, directors, and the like. They know their ideas best. They know at a core, emotional, heartfelt level what they want to get across to the audience, and the brands know the brands. So it is always sort of a unique mix where you have to come together. It has to be a collaborative, conversation about what's gonna make most sense for the property and the platform. So.
Yeah, and the thing that we found that's interesting, and this is a funny aside, is like the cruise, where we'll make a show and it'll go out. We'll still be delivering episode 8, 9, and 10 while episode 1 premieres, and they're actually. All of a sudden, this new energy comes into the post-production department because Twitter went crazy because of some thing that happened in episode 1, and so got killed, and it connects the team making the show to the people watching it in a way I've just never experienced, and it makes the show better. It ultimately, you can start seeing what they like, what they don't like. They're posting and sharing it, and all of a sudden our community at the office is just so much more engaged in the content we're making, which I think ultimately is better as a production company. It's better to have that feeling of we're really all in this together, and people are paying attention. It's not just gone into sort of the ether of programming.
Okay, so fair warning, we're going to be able to take questions from the crowd. We're going to do one quick thing here, but if anyone does have any questions, maybe we could bring up the lights in a sec too. We will have some folks with microphones to go around, so I'm letting you have 2 minutes to think about your questions if you have any. Just before, while you're thinking and we're pondering here, let's talk about data. We heard about data this morning. There was a panel about it earlier. The promise of these streaming platforms and things that live in a digital environments is that there is endless data and more data, and we'll talk about YouTube as a data farm in itself. But I'm curious, just from a creator's point of view and broadcaster point of view, are these digital platforms arming you with more data? Do you feel like you have more data than the olden days of a TV-only rating as the kind of currency? Obviously, still the core currency for linear and what the advertising still transacts on. But on the streaming platforms, are you seeing more data to make decisions to look at content development? How do you categorize that promise of data in that world?
I think data is great, and obviously yes, we have way more access to it, and it's good to know how long people are watching for, when they're tuning in and tuning out. But at the end of the day, it's nice if a creator has an idea for something and they make the show they want to make, and that's that's art, right? Like that's what at least we're trying to make. I want to make the show that the creator had a vision for, and that they wrote the script for, and that maybe they were just locked in a closet somewhere. And they hadn't seen anyone in 3 years, and then they came out with this great idea. Like that's more where I'm coming from. I think data is really important for broadcasters, and to keep that mandate of making sure they have the right shows that are going to sell the ads. But coming from a strictly sort of producer, production company, creator point of view, I like to see people that have personal stories and stories that they want to get across, and not really worry about whether someone's going to tune in or out, because ultimately people find the stuff if it's good. So
Other thoughts from you guys in terms of the data play?
Well, for use Skammen as an example, we use data to see when our target audience was home from school, or we could see when they were really into the show, and then we published, after that to make sure that they got it. But I must say that we are now using analytics in a much broader sense than we used to do. And I think that, of course, we have to create the content, yeah. But I think it's also important to see the whole, so we make sure that we reach broader with our stories.
So Joel, given, YouTube has always been a platform full of data and analytics and has that connection, how, as you guys think about YouTube Originals and the second slate, the third slate, kind of the future of it, how do you make renewal decisions? I know in the broadcast world, we live by the Numeris or the Nielsen currency, and we look at that audience that we cume, and that's our advertising model, and that's how we make a lot of our decisions, is how that currency kind of works today. In your world, how do you make a renewal decision? What are the data inputs you think about?
There's a lot behind it. At the end of the day, I'll start at the beginning of a project, though, because I think that data is helpful for sort of directional support. So if you have a question of whether or not specific Google queries, there's enough buzz around a certain topic or something, and then throughout production and post, we don't necessarily kind of deep dive. I know you mentioned Kate, like launching at the same time you're in post, and we've been a little bit further ahead. We're typically already in the can by the time we go live and publish. But then, the good thing about YouTube is that the creators themselves have our analytics tools that they can watch on a hyper-granular level. So they don't need to take those cues from us. They don't need to take those cues from the platform. They are, because it's data from us, but it's very specific to them, and they can customize and take a look. So on the renewals, there's a lot that goes into it. At the end of the day, there are 1.5 billion unique users on the platform every month. So at least on the AVOD side, that's a lot of audience to serve. We look at what slots we have available. You can look at performance data as far as viewership. You can look about, was it shared? Sort of how long do people stay? What are the completion rates? You can look at subscription drivers. Was that the first piece of content they'd looked at when they subscribed to YouTube Red? You can look at retention. You can look at churn. You can find out when people left. There's just so much behind it that all those factors come into play. But then there's also sort of the non-detailed data of what was the industry reception, what was the perception from the ad buyers if it was an AVOD program. So there's a lot of sort of different masters to serve in that regard of taking a look and saying, what's the decision on the cycle too. So a lot goes into it. It's
not one thing, clearly.
It's not just one person saying that show's going. So yeah.
All right. Do we have any questions in the audience? If you have, just raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone.
No questions.
This has not been a question-filled group.
Yes.
No?
Oh, sorry. We do have. Maybe? No? Yeah.
This is directed to the gentleman from YouTube. Just trying to get a sense of how one would approach YouTube with a project, and what kind of budget range are you looking at? And also, you mentioned, is it just shorts, or what kind of time, running times are you looking at?
Sure. So the best way to approach, we take sort of a little bit of a traditional media process in that regard. So oftentimes you could align yourself with a creator if it's a creator-centric program, and they could surface that to the team through their partner managers or others that work at YouTube. Or we take the agency and the manager route. So they make introductions directly to our development team. We have a head of scripted who's basically overseeing features and drama. We have another head of comedy, another head of unscripted, and the head of international. So they'll field those pitches. Runtimes are, like I mentioned earlier, we generally try to conform with sort of what the downstream market would need. So we're in the space of 22s and 44s generally speaking, but those runtimes are flexible. We typically will put a floor on it just to make sure that it has a second life. But you can exceed those runtimes on an episode-by-episode basis if that's what the creative requires. And then, and we also break our own rules because we did a 96-hour live program with Katy Perry, and so you want to do a 96-hour live show, we're open to that as well. And on the budget side, we basically message the community that we're in the at least in the States, we're in the kind of basic cable. We're either sort of at that level or above. as far as the marketplace. And there are a few projects throughout that, obviously Cobra Kai, as you saw, is, it's Sony, it's pre-existing IP, and as much as, Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka wanted to get back together, on the screen.
That'd be cool.
It's going to be it's an expensive project. So.
Wax on, wax off, and all that good stuff.
It's going to be fun.
All right.
It's 30 years after the All Valley tournament.
That's awesome. Any other questions from the crowd? Scanning. All right, well, I have a question for this group. You guys are all in the middle of creating some really innovative and great, cool stuff across a whole bunch of platforms. I'm curious, just for inspiration, who you look toward, who you look out and say, yeah, they're doing cool things, and there's one. It's easy to point to each other. I won't just point to each other.
A couple chairs down.
Because there's a lot of cool stuff happening right here. But I'm curious, who else in the industry are just best practices of, hey, yeah, they're cool, doing some cool stuff. Who do you look toward? Inspires you?
I'm gonna look over that way.
Shall I start since everybody's pointing at me? No, no.
Sure.
Thank you. No, I think that you mentioned earlier the young talent that are going to your spaces and creating stuff. Those are who are inspiring me.
There are a lot of people
and
out
the
there
community that they are creating among each other.
Yeah.
That is something that is really inspiring.
Yeah, it's always amazing to see. I mean, you just give, the barrier to entry has been demolished, as far as content's concerned. It's relatively inexpensive, and yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the community aspect to creators, and the fact that, a Michelle Phan can start a YouTube channel and have, grow a $500 million beauty company off that is, that's empowering. That's something.
And you have to look at it as inspiring, because if not, as a TV producer, it's terrifying that anybody can, that whole feeling of we can only do this is just not true anymore, and you have to it gives us the opportunity to, try and help mentor these people and bring them into the fold, give them a platform and a home to, you can start working almost in those sort of studio models where you can start supporting young talent. And Canada's really incredibly good at that. Certainly in the international market, there's more support of young, innovative talent here between the actual creators, but also the whole technology side of things. I mean, things are changing so much that there's got to be a way, and we all have to move towards that feeling of, where's the dovetail in technology creation and these new streaming platforms.
Keeps us honest. All that competition's good.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, technology, I mean, one thing that I sort of came across recently, and we were talking about it at dinner, but this HQ Trivia Live. So basically just sort of combines a game show in real time on an app, and they just have this crazy growing fan base. Everyone's sort of logging in, and it's just such a simple format. So that for me is just something that I was definitely inspired by recently, and I just think that it's just the classic, like the most simple thing. They say the best game shows are the ones you can watch with no sound, and this one obviously there is sound, but you log in at, let's say, 3 p.m. and then they have a prize giveaway, and you can share the prize giveaway. So
who here has played HQ Trivia Live? You guys aware of it? It is at 3 o'clock, I think, right? Like literally in a couple of minutes or so. But it has been an amazing phenomenon to see it grow really quickly.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing we haven't talked about at all is the world of podcasts, which I'm now just newly addicted to. But all of a sudden, it's like the age of radio. I mean, you can tell a story, and if the story's good, you don't have to look at it. You can actually get immersed properly. And I think as visual producers, we have to look to that storytelling, because it ups the game, for sure.
Any closing thoughts, anyone? We good?
I don't know. I mean, my big push is just I want creative people to be creative. I just feel like being anchored, and I come from traditional media, and that's what my 20-something years of work come from, but there's great opportunity out there. So I just encourage people to think about technology, think about interactive elements, think about standard programming abilities, because you should have those creative options open.
And take risks.
Yeah, I think it's.
And continue to create stories that open up hearts and minds.
I think it's hard for a lot of creators to get started. There's a lot of really creative people, but then to actually do that, I think once you're going, it's one thing. Like once you have the 10,000 subs, you get access to the studio, and now you can realize more of your ideas. But when you have that full-time job and you're writing your scripts and you want to make it happen, it's hard for these people to take the jump and to really do that. So.
Well, listen, I want to
I
thank
know we're out of time, so.
want to thank the panel for being here today, and hopefully we've had an interesting conversation. We're going to be around if anyone has questions for the panel after. They'll just be grabbing a drink at some point soon, or right?
Sure.
Is that
Yes.
good?
Sure.
Joel wants to get on the canal at some point before you go, so we
do.
got to get him skating
I'll get out there.
while he's here. But anyway, thank you for your time, and have a great rest of the conference.
Thanks,
Thank you.